Ladies and gentlemen, the top 25 albums of the year brought to you by yours truly. Look, I know there's only 24 hours left in this year. I contemplated even making this video, but my OCD music organization brain just told me to bop the video out. So here you go. Coming in at number 25, I have For All the Dogs by Drake. And if it matters, I'd say the Scary Hours edition, the deluxe that he put out, is the one I'll be talking about. Okay, look, I know a lot of y'all, this album fell pretty flat, but honestly, taking a look back through this track list, it has some of the most fire and cohesive production that we've had Drake rapping over in a very long time. I saw a video breaking down the different samples used in this album, and it gives a very clear idea that the producers wanted to create a cohesive soundscape. The Frank Ocean sample here on Virginia Beach, amazing. The Alchemist beat that we were graced with in the Scary Hours. The Conductor Williams beat on 8 a.m. in Charlotte. The thing that's really a make or break for a lot of y'all with this is that Drake is really just displaying his very unique flavor of misogyny. But this is nothing new for him, okay? I mean, what are we expecting at this point? Not to mention that this is album cover of the year by Adonis, who is Drake's son. Number 24, Skrillex with Quest for Fire. This album came out in tandem with another album. I don't know if you guys remember that. They came out kind of back to back. And the gap in quality between the two is really something. This album spoke to me a lot. It was proving that Skrillex can still be relevant in today's soundscape. It gave me that feeling of when I first heard dubstep, back in middle school, and just having that exciting feeling of what the heck is that sound, what's going on here. And again, I'm going to just talk about this album cover. It's absolutely fire. It drew me into the project. It gave me the feel of what they were going for. Number 23, Zach Bryan with his self-titled album, Zach Bryan. This album is very reminiscent of old country, and that's not a genre I was interested in for many years, but having gotten into a lot of country music over the last few years, and then hearing this album just gives me feelings of nostalgia. It is a very classic sort of singer-songwriter type of album. There are some gorgeous features on here. I'd like to shout out Casey Musgraves, who absolutely kills her part on the song I Remember Everything. And yeah, if you guys like that sort of classic country feel that is leaning towards the new age, great album to check out. 22, Yard by Slow Pulp. This is the second album from Madison, Wisconsin band. These guys are out of my hometown. I went to high school with many of the members, so it has been exciting to see their rise into popularity. This album behind me here, Yard, is extremely well mixed and produced. If there's an album that you can listen to on a nice pair of headphones and just get lost, this is definitely one of them. The mixing is just truly top-notch. The vibes and tones on this album are reminiscent of a lot of 90s acts, maybe a Mazzy Star, a Cocteau Twins. Me personally, I even got some Neil Young feelings. This album is truly beautiful, and there's a lot of really nice songs on it. 21, Geese with their album 3D Country. This is an absolutely unhinged and wacky rock and roll album. Any of you out there saying rock and roll is dead, this is the album that you need to check out right here. And tell me if you still feel that way. There are a lot of fresh ideas here, mixed with some clear influences of older artists. It's extremely energetic and just fun to listen to. I have seen this being talked about a lot in the music sphere, so if you guys haven't checked this one out yet, now is your time. Number 20, Knack Saw Jim Duggan by ST Knack. ST Knack is a rapper that I just happened to be getting really into this year, doing a deep dive on their catalog, And then come to find out, Westside Gunn is going to be executive producing an album for Knack. This album is extremely grimy sounding. Obviously, under the hands of Westside Gunn, this album is extremely cohesive. It's very well sequenced. This album cover is a piece of art by an artist named Sam Evans for the project. And this really just shows what the underground hip-hop scene is good at. You know, we're getting a whole piece of original art here mixed with original art within the track list as well. And that's why I love this project. It's one that I certainly will come back to in the future. Number 19, Young Thug's Business is Business. Now, I'm curious as to the timeline of which this album was recorded, given Young Thug's current legal battle. This is a very good project. It has some of my favorite songs by Young Thug ever. And the reason I felt like I had to put it on this list is it's not in a lot of these year-end lists. Through this track list, you have songs like Hellcat Kenny. You've got songs like Jonesboro, my favorite Thug song of all time. You've got Money on the Dresser, Cars Bring Me Out with Future. Not to mention, and you guys are going to see this as a theme throughout the video, but this album cover, okay? We've got Thug in court, looking back, just hard as heck, man. It's all black and white, just a grimy album cover that draws me into the sound. Number 18, the artist Tumor with the album Praise a God Who Chews, but which does not consume. Simply put, parentheses, hot between worlds. Now, this is a crazy, wacky, long album title. This is the second album from this psychedelic modern artist, Tumor, and there's really no expense spared on how otherworldly this album ended up sounding. There are many, many layers being put on top of each other to create this rich and textured sound. It is very psychedelic. It is very thought-provoking. A couple of songs that really jumped out to me, okay? Lovely Sewer. The song Echolalia was a single from the album. I had it in rotation most of the year. If any of the descriptive words I used call out to you, please check this one out. It is a banger. Number 17, Kamikaze The God Fahim with their follow-up to 2018's Notorious Dump Legends. The second installment here, okay? This is an underground hip-hop gem, one of my favorite from the year. The beat selection is very thoughtful in this album. We've got a couple of absolute bangers from Nicholas Craven. We've got songs from Sahu Gold and many other of the common household names in the underground hip-hop scene. Kamikaze The God Fahim really just further solidify themselves as incredible collaborators. I talked about this in my top songs of the year playlist, but the way that they pass the mic off to each other in this album is so unique and it really stands out. Not to mention, again, we have a very cool album cover, right? Number 16, I have Laigh by Sampha. Okay, please don't click off the video. I know this was a top 10 or maybe even a top 1 album for many of you this year, and I would not argue with that stance at all. This is a extremely unique sounding R&B album. There's really nothing that sounds like this, and the things that Sampha does with his voice are just one of one. I'd like to shout out that this album is 41 minutes and it is very concise. There's absolutely no filler. Everything makes sense within the album. The pacing is very, very well thought out. The reason this wasn't a little bit higher for me is that it just didn't hit me in the feels like a lot of you are saying, but that is not to say that this is not an incredible project. Number 15, Westside Gunn, And Then You Pray For Me. This is Westside Gunn's follow-up to arguably his best album ever, Pray for Paris. Westside Gunn is further solidifying himself as just an incredible collaborator and someone that has a true vision for the artistry of hip-hop. There is a very unique feature list on this album. Many artists that you wouldn't imagine to work with Griselda that work really well. We have some of the best verses of the year on this album. Stove God Cooks is clearly a highlight. JID on Mama's Primetime, I think, is the verse of the year. Now, why is this album up here at number 15? I gotta be honest with you guys, okay? A lot of the trap production that Westside Gunn chose for this just does not mesh for me. I could be eating my words in 5-10 years as this album continues to digest, but I gotta be honest with the way I was feeling at the time. Oh, and album cover by Mr. Virgil Abloh, okay? Very cool Caravaggio piece here with Westside Gunn's Chains. Number 14, JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown with their collaborative album Scaring the Hoes. Okay, I know I told you not to click off for my Sampha placement. This is really gonna cause a stir as well. I know this is a very highly acclaimed album this year, and many people connected with it very deeply. Both JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown are very eccentric rappers, and the way that they mesh on this album just makes a lot of sense. JPEG Mafia actually created all the beats for this album on this very old technology of splicing samples, and it gives it this very unorthodox feeling. This is truly disjointed and sample-heavy hip-hop at its best, okay? The only reason why this is not higher for me is it just was not in my constant rotation. There is no denying that this is an incredible album, and it really has no skips. If you like your music kind of unorthodox and sonically challenging, this is one for you. Number 13, Edo and Future Wave with their album Dead Poets. This is an album that I did a review of back in January, and it stuck with me through the year. This album is very thematically cool. It links kind of the growing up in difficult circumstances with being a poet of Shakespeare's ilk, and that is a really cool kind of mesh. Future Wave's beats on here are extremely layered and full sounding. Maybe one of the most cohesive sounding projects sonically this year. I know this wasn't in anyone's top albums list, alright? But it really did hit for me. I'm truly excited to see what Edo brings in the future. Hey, a little change of pace here. Coming in at number 12, I've got Dominic Fike with his album Sunburn. This is a super just fun and lighthearted album. Sonically, it sounds very youthful. Dominic Fike takes a much more indie rock approach in this project, channeling vibes such as Weezer. I gotta say, July was the perfect month for a project like this to come out. It is very summery and it makes you feel carefree. This caused me to connect with it quite a bit. Coming in at number 11, I have Q with Soul Present, okay? I did a review of this album when it came out. Q is a very promising up-and-coming R&B artist. There are many fun and dancey sounds on this project. It truly is one that you listen to by yourself. You just be dancing around the house, not caring what you look like. There are themes of a Marvin Gaye, of a Michael Jackson, and it embodies many of the sounds of that era. Not to mention, okay, one of my favorite songs of the entire year is on this album, being the track Today. This is an artist that I plan to keep a very close eye on. I could see him really rising the ranks into a top tier artist in the future. Top 10 here, guys, okay? Moving on. Number 10, I've got Glorious Game by L. Michaels Affair and Black Thought. This is truly a dream collaboration of artists. To see such a top-tier MC like Black Thought rapping over these live instrumentation and funky soul-inspired beats made by L. Michaels Affair, is just incredible. Another album I did a review of this year, Black Thought, is just continuing this theme over the last few years of just creating some of the best music I think he's ever been a part of. Songs on here like Glorious Game, absolutely amazing. Songs like The Weather, truly thought-provoking and gorgeous. Number 9 on my list, Teo Touchdown with How Do You Sleep at Night. Teo probably had the biggest year of any up-and-coming artist, with his many placements on mainstream albums, as well as coming out with his debut himself. I'm just gonna read you this little description of the genre that Teo has created here from an interview earlier this year. Okay, so he calls this music rock and boom. R&B with the intensity of rock and the penmanship of hip-hop. Okay, that describes his music better than I ever could. If any of those genres remotely interest you, this album is for you. Tezo's lyrics are at times silly, but he carries this altruistic sort of approach to his music. And he makes you feel like, you know, you can achieve the greats that he has, because he's just this everyday guy pursuing his art. Not to mention that Teo is a genius producer. A lot of the sonics on this album are just so unique and new that I could see a whole wave of music being spawned from this sound. Number 8, Billy Woods and Kenny Segal with their album Maps. This is the second collaborative album between rapper Billy Woods and multi-instrumentalist Kenny Segal. If you have never listened to Billy Woods' music, the only way I can describe him is that he's like the Souls-like of hip-hop, okay? In order to glean the meaning and get better at listening to him, you have to put in the hours, spend time thinking, reading, digesting what he's saying. This is not something you can just put on passively and have it wash over you. Billy Woods absolutely shines over the live jazz instrumentation. A lot of the drumming on this album is just very unique and not something you would hear in any other hip-hop. There is top-tier writing and lyricism all throughout the album, as to be expected. The features greatly add to the experience, okay? Like, I think they actually told the features of this album what the general theme was so that they could really feel like they're a part of the song, not just phoning in a verse from wherever. Number 7, Larry June and The Alchemist with The Great Escape. This is an album I had in constant rotation throughout the summer. It's a very summery album, honestly. Alchemist is on top of his game, and he really is a producer that can create a sonic palette for an artist that's not samey whatsoever to his many other projects. With that being said, this is one of my favorite Alchemist palettes that I have ever heard, okay? It is breezy, it's easygoing, and it lays out the perfect soundscape for Larry June to, you know, give his slow and meticulous delivery. A lot of the braggadocio on this album is really just about self-improvement and betterment, and it's something that I think we could all glean a little bit of knowledge from. Number 6, Bad Bunny. Nadie sabe lo que va a pasar mañana. Okay, I'm sorry about my pronunciation of that. Just had to get it out of the way. I have been absolutely addicted to listening to this one. Bad Bunny is just in his rapping bag on this album, okay? I don't speak Spanish, but I did have a friend translate many of these songs for me so that I could glean that meaning. And to be honest, you can feel what he's talking about regardless of what you speak. I would like to shout out that on this album, Bad Bunny uses almost primarily Puerto Rican producers and features. He's an artist that could get any of the big names in the mainstream on his album, and instead he's staying true to his roots and bringing up that Puerto Rican sound with him. I think that is just very admirable, and it just works great on the album. Best songs on this album: Monaco, Cybertruck, and my personal favorite, Vaticano. If you have not listened to this, what are you doing, okay? Top 5 here. I have James Blake, Playing Robots into Heaven. I liked this album, and then I saw James live in concert in Chicago this summer, and then I loved this album, okay? It really translated beautifully into a live soundscape. I did a review of this one on the channel, but in brief, we see James here tapping back into these electronic roots that when he started making music really set him apart. This thing is just gorgeous, okay? I would listen to it absolutely any time. It's not something that has worn on me whatsoever. I can always find happiness in the many synth layers and gorgeous singing of James, as well as the very exciting and energetic electronic breakdowns. Number 4, Lana Del Rey, Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard? Okay, I am a huge Lana fan. She's my favorite singer-songwriter of this generation. This album is very soft and tender, and it sees Lana singing extremely personal lyrics about death, about her family, about love. Quite possibly the most personal she's ever been on a project. The approach of this album is very ballad-esque songwriting that truly unveils itself the more times you begin to listen to it. We've got production credits from Jack Antonoff, who I think has been a part of some of the best songs Lana has ever made. One thing I will say, if you haven't liked music from Lana post NFR, Norman fucking Rockwell, okay, this is not going to do it for you. But if you have, this is kind of the peak of that sound. A gorgeous culmination of the past 3 records, just done at the top level. Number 3, Daniel Caesar, Never Enough. Throughout these tracks, there is beautiful and tender songwriting. There are very catchy hooks. There is very cohesive production throughout. Having this album come out earlier in the year gave it a lot of time to grow on me. The truth of the matter is, guys, okay, we've lived in a Frank Ocean-less world since 2016, apart from a couple of singles that Frank released. And this is something that fills the void in the meantime. If you are a huge fan of that genre or of a Frank Ocean, this is an album that you need to check out. Really, my only complaint here is that there are not a ton of risks being taken. It is fairly by the numbers, but it is done at such a high level that hardly matters. Number 2, Lil Yachty. Let's start here. Let me begin by just crediting the instrumentation that happens on this album. The musicians that worked to create this soundscape deserve a lot of credit. This is possibly the best jump from a hip-hop artist to another genre that I've ever listened to. That genre being psychedelic rock. There are many sounds of Pink Floyd on here, many sounds of the aforementioned artist Tumor. I really cannot stress enough, okay, that Yachty merged these genres of hip-hop and psychedelia, all while coming across very genuine and not corny. Songs like The Black Seminole, okay, a spoken word piece like Failure here. Drive Me Crazy, another banger. I've Officially Lost Vision. There are no skips on the album, and the songs transform into one another very seamlessly. This is something that if you weren't looking at the track list, you wouldn't even know when the songs were changing. If you have not checked this one out this year, what are you doing? Coming in at number 1 album of 2023, okay, it has got to be Utopia. There is not a world in which this was not the best album of the year. There just isn't, okay? I strangely feel that this album is underrated, and once we look back at it in a few years, people will begin to rank it above Astroworld, maybe even above a Rodeo in certain cases. This 6-song run at the beginning of the album is the best run of songs that I have heard in years. Alright, let's just take a look here. Hyena, banger. Thank God, banger. Modern Jam. My Eyes, my song of the year this year, alright? God's Country, Sirens, okay? And I didn't choose to put Meltdown in those 6 songs, but okay, it's a good song still. Fiend, banger. Del Resto, banger. I know. This is truly filling the void of every Kanye fan out there. Travis is embodying that Yeezus era Kanye of just absolute chaos, organized to sound beautiful. The features on this album are placed in very unique ways. We've got Justin Vernon just sprinkled in there. We've got Sampha sprinkled in there, okay? There's Beyonce. We've got Young Thug with an incredible verse on Schizo. SZA gives an incredible performance as well. Song structures here are so far from something that we're used to. Everything is just meandering and you never know which turn you're gonna take next. This is the best produced album of the year, easily. That is my number one. There's not much more I can say about it. Thank you for checking out my top 25 video. I know that there is only 24 hours left in the year, so I appreciate y'all if you actually watch this. And, you know, if I get 3 likes, I'll do the video again next year. All right? Peace.